Welcome to the IoT Unicorn Podcast. This is Pete Bernard from Microsoft. We have a very special guest today. We're going to be talking about long-term technology trends in the IoT space. So let's get started. Today, we have an interesting conversation with Lilac Ilan, who's the Assistant Vice President of IoT at AT&T. And we had a really interesting conversation about her journey from the Federal Reserve to AT&T, what that was all about, how AT&T works with diverse teams. We also are going to talk about some manufacturing scenarios and autonomous systems, where that's all heading. Of course, this being a telco conversation, we will talk about 5G, and we'll also talk about all kinds of interesting cellular connected things and where that's heading. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. Lilac, thanks for joining.
You're welcome.
We actually met, I believe, at the first time at CES.
Yeah.
Seems like a long time ago. It wasn't that long ago. It was back when
January.
we had trade shows.
When trade shows were allowed and handshakes were allowed as well.
Yeah, we shook hands. And
we shook
talked.
hands. There were more than 10 people in the room.
Yeah. So that was pretty wild. And we've had some conversations since then. But I did want to have you on the show because obviously AT&T. Everyone knows who AT&T is, but the combination of AT&T's network and technology and IoT. Things being connected all the time from anywhere, it starts to really get pretty exciting in the IoT space. And so I'm looking forward to talking about some of that stuff today. Maybe we can start a little bit. We can kind of rewind a little bit. So you're based in Atlanta area? Is that your?
Yeah, I'm based in Atlanta.
So tell me a little bit about the journey to Atlanta. Are you from Atlanta originally? And AT&T, like when did you start working for them? Like give me a little bit of give us some context for how we got here.
How we got here to this role and how I got to AT&T. Sure. Yeah. So I'm originally, by my name, you can tell, I'm not originally from Atlanta. This is not a Southern name. Born and raised in Tel Aviv. And I moved to the United States in 2001, working for the Federal Reserve Bank. And then 2005, I was lucky enough to have a chance to move to Atlanta with my husband's job at that time. And I joined AT&T. So that's, first of all, what kind of brought me to Atlanta.
Right. And was the Fed Reserve in Washington, D.C., or where's the Fed?
There are 13 branches of the Federal Reserve, and I was at the Kansas City branch.
Okay.
As an economist working for the Federal Reserve Bank, as a research associate, I said, with economy background, it was a really good school for global economy, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that was good. And then AT&T started. My first job was really around starting up a new business. And if you remember the good old Yellow Pages days, they started in 2005, a new startup, and they were looking for people to kind of lead that startup. And that startup was all around online advertising. So this is the time, if you remember, the dot-com flourish, Yahoo, SEM, SEO, that's the start of it. Yep. And then kind of migrating and developing into the mobile advertising world and targeted ads. So that was my startup. We kind of was a team leading that one on. I stayed in that role for 7 years and 4 different marketing roles. And another good school, another key learnings from there. But I'll say that this is the first career station of my life where I learned how to combine technology and business acumen to stand up a profitable business, right? So a very successful, I would say, startup. And because it was that successful, it was then spin off and sold in 2012. So I was supposed to say I had a really good exit, only if I had the right startup, right? But within AT&T, I made my exit.
Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And Yeah, I remember the Yellow Pages. They kind of stopped coming eventually. They just stopped delivering those things. But that's probably I'm curious if I think if we did like a survey, there's a certain age cutoff where people are like, "What is Yellow Pages?"
Right? Know that my daughters even know what it is anymore.
Yeah, they have no concept.
For years, it was the thing that you put under the projector. But now you don't need projectors anymore. So I think some generation, especially my generation, knows it as the things you put underneath a projector.
Yes, exactly. Yes, the good old days.
And then that was a good startup. And they figured, AT&T, that I could do startups. Mm-hmm. So I was called to lead another startup. Mm. And this time at 2012, starting of 2013, a startup around big data. So that's kind of starting to be more interesting now. So all around big data and data monetization. So that was the question of how do you take AT&T data assets to make use of it, to monetize it, both internally and externally. Externally is how do you help customers make sense of data.
Right.
This is the first time that I actually came across the concept of devices that are not iPhones, right? Or any cell phone for that matter.
Right.
And we called it then emerging devices. We didn't even call it Internet of Things. Mm-hmm. So how do you take data that comes from emerging devices and help enterprise make sense of it, gain insight, and help them act on those insights from the data? My first product to market was all around analytic use cases for what we call today IoT. We were developing cloud infrastructure, or platform for analytics, and offering those to enterprises. So that was my first venture into IoT. Mm-hmm. And then in 2017, I formally joined the IoT team here in Atlanta.
I see. Yeah, and AT&T's been through a lot of changes. I mean, speaking of Yellow Pages, I mean, obviously there's the old history of AT&T. We don't need to go back that far, but acquisition of DirecTV, most people think of AT&T as like, the thing that powers my iPhone, that's connected to the network. But obviously AT&T is much broader than that. You have the entertainment business, and you also do a lot of B2B, right? You sell a lot to businesses and helping them, power their businesses, right?
Absolutely. So it's a good point. I think a lot of people knows the AT&T as you and I as our cellular provider, but there's a one large business unit at AT&T that aims around solutions and connectivity solutions for businesses. And it's not just connectivity, right? It's just how can we empower businesses to stay connected to their end customers and help them make decisions faster and more effectively. And IoT, the business that I'm running right now, is really around how do we help enterprise customers across many industries to help them with transformation. So we're in the midst of that transformation.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think we've talked about it on the show before that IoT is sort of a component to a larger transformation strategy. And sometimes we have companies that work with Microsoft that are going through digital transformation, and there's a lot of internal processes and systems. And in some cases, IoT is part of that solution, not always, but it's usually part of a larger business outcome that everyone's trying to get to, right? It's not just an embedded system that talks to the cloud. That's kind of just the starting point, I think.
Yeah, IoT is the fundamental piece that enables a larger digital transformation. It's kind of like having the connecting thing is that fundamental thing that ignite that digital transformation. Yeah,
and obviously AT&T is in the connecting business, so that's good.
Yes. So we get to, I think, 2017, I joined the IoT team, and I think in the IoT space, there's a couple of roles that I've been there. I kind of took place until I got to where I am today, but I've done global expansion of IoT services, IoT is not domestic only, right?
Sure.
Devices roam, and you have to track them across the world. Think about shipping company, think about asset tracking, think about connected cars, right? They have to be global. So we play a big role in our AT&T plays a big role around global IoT services to our enterprise. And then in 2019, I expanded my role furthermore. And now I manage a team who leads IoT platforms, similar to what you guys have at Microsoft, or asset tracking solution. How do you then pile and combine AI and machine learning with IoT? And then I manage our relationship with cloud providers like Microsoft for joint go-to-market initiative for IoT. Hence our meeting at CES.
There you go. It all comes back to
it's
the
all
CES meeting.
come back to CES.
So that's interesting. So for you, you went from a pretty pure economic sort of role analysis, and now you're a leader in this kind of technology group. And so do you have other people that you work with that have your kind of background, or are you pretty unique in that regard?
What unique about AT&T is that you will find a great combination of teams that are, you will find the people that are highly, highly technical, and then you'll find the people that are highly business leader. And teams are always a hybrid of those together. And finding that right mix in a team and how you collaborate with them, that's what's makes us very successful in this environment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading so much about, and Microsoft's obviously been on this journey as well. The diversity of the team is really a key indicator of the strength of the team.
Yes.
And, so often, I can think back in my earlier career, you get on a team and everyone has exactly the same background. It's like, I'm a embedded developer and so is everyone else. And then it's like, you're not able to really see the big picture and you only know what you know. And so having other folks on the team with different backgrounds and experiences really opens up, all the possibilities of ways to solve problems and go forward. So that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And in addition to that, I think there's also, I will say, a shift in the way AT&T operated, or a lot of companies that I worked for in the past, even before my Federal Reserve Bank days. It's you kept the IT and the developer in one area and you keep the business people in another area, and they're not necessarily talking to each other. That's not the way we operate. We have pods, so we have our people who develop the product working side by side or in the same pod in the same area with the product management. So you can give the requirements on the fly, and your integrated work is day to day. You're not like, hey, let me check on my requirement 550s to figure out where it is in the development cycle. That's not the way we work anymore. That integration is a key.
Yeah. No, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about IoT and AT&T and what's happening there. So we can sort of in our mind's eye imagine what happens when everything gets connected all the time. What are kind of the big trends that you're seeing that are changing, how people traditionally think of IoT, from AT&T's perspective? What are the sort of the things you're seeing that you're on the horizon, investigating and working with companies on?
Sure. I'll start with first kind of give people, I think I mentioned to you in the beginning, which is the connecting device is the key, right? And AT&T is doing nothing, or I say the majority or our focus is really around the connecting of things, right? That's our core. That's our core competency. So let me give you some statistics on what does it mean to be a leader in that connectivity space for IoT. And then we'll talk about how do we transform and disrupt some of the industry that we're seeing. So I'll say that up until Q4 of 2019, AT&T has 66 million connecting devices on our network. Right? So every 2 seconds, we add one connected device to our network. manufacturing or factories that filled with smart connected devices kind of holds the promise of the biggest global transformation since, I would say, the Industrial Revolution.
Sure. Steam engine, basically.
Steam engine, right? Now let's think about the 4.0 of the steam engine, right?
Sure.
Is that how those smart factories and connected devices, they are kind of interoperate between themselves and read each other. That would enable kind of a decentralized decision and drive productivity. It improve safety and reduce operational cost. Now, take that censored factory and apply AI and machine learning on data that comes from the machine, like vibration, temperature, shock. And that what allows manufacturers to move into a predictive machine failure before it even happens, and move from a kind of timely based maintenance to a predictive based maintenance.
Yeah, that's a huge one. We've seen that a lot now with people measuring. I think I'd mentioned on another show, there's lots of sensors you can put into devices to understand their wear patterns and other things. And, it's the whole area of anomaly detection is fascinating. Sorry, I was interrupting. Go ahead.
No, you're not interrupting. That is really it, right? It's that move into prediction, predicted failure, predictive anomaly detection, predictive replenishment in retail. Going into that predictive mode is what we're looking for. In fact, there is some statistic that I'll give you that manufacturers' adoption of machine learning and analysis to improve their predictive maintenance is predicted to increase 38% in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. And they will do that because there is an ROI. So I think McKinsey looked at what would be the ROI. Why would they do that? So predictive maintenance in industrial and equipment is forecasted to yield 10% reduction in annual maintenance cost, up to 20% downtime reduction, and 25% reduction in inspection cost. Right. That's the reason why we're expecting that 38% increase in the 5 years, the ROI and the benefit that manufacturers will see.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it's, I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, but it is, there's the safety issues around inspection. There's the downtime. I mean, a lot of these industries, there's one company we work with, it's a mining company, and, they have these big plates where the rocks are put onto the plates, and there's only a few of these plates for a mining pit that the dump trucks dump their rocks onto, and for analysis and weighing, if one of those plates stops working, you're effectively cutting your output for that mine, by a pretty big chunk. So I can imagine any kind of factory where you've got machines like that are big, expensive machines, doing very high speed work. You cannot have them go offline. By accident. I mean, certainly there's maintenance there, but that I think that's a huge one, and I think we're seeing a lot of traction in that. And like you said, all those devices, they need to be instrumented. Sometimes it's a matter of just measuring the current draw, and even analyzing current draw variations. You can determine sort of how much load is being put on the machine. But then there's the connecting that data into the cloud for analysis, and obviously that's where AT&T comes in, right? So
AT&T and companies like yourself, when we offer the AI and machine learning combined together. So I think this is where you would see that power of, IoT is not just one player. It's the combination of multiple players in that ecosystem to yield the maximum value. So we talked about that. Another area where you'll see a big change, and we're seeing a lot of positive outcome coming of that. It's a topic that close to mind. It's where the asset tracking started. So first, when it came to asset tracking, it's like, just let me know when an asset left a field. So think about those big tractors and heavy equipment that you wanted to know where they're located and if they left a certain field. But now think about the evolution of that, which what we're calling the global supply chain, and the ability to track an asset from shipping all the way to the retail store into the shelf and understanding what's going on there. The ability to understand and manage demand and inventories based on a real-time supply chain. This is another big area where we're seeing new and exciting technologies come together. And again, back to my comment around, it's not a single provider that can give it to you. This is a fleet company coming together with connectivity providers, with cloud providers like yourself. And, down the road, we're going to talk about edge compute providers that, like AT&T and others, that can give you applications to manage an asset from shipping all the way to the shelf.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, first of all, yes, to your point, I mean, I've heard IoT is described as a team sport. We need everybody doing their thing. It's team sport. And, it's the other thing that's interesting about asset tracking, and I think you probably have a lot more expertise on this than I do, but the ability to understand the provenance, not only the location, but the provenance of the item that you're holding in your hand is, I think, kind of fascinating. I'd love to be able to someday, hold up my phone to a banana at Whole Foods and I can sort of get the whole, map of the banana, as it
where it came from,
wherever. Yeah, that'd be kind of fun. I mean, I don't know, just interesting. But I'd still buy the banana.
Yeah, it is interesting, especially if you want, if it's interesting for you, if it was, really organic or if it's friendly grown. Absolutely. Those are things that you could definitely do today. And it's a couple of the supply chain for food. There's a couple of great players there. And that's by itself another podcast that we could do on the end-to-end food supply chain. I think that would be an interesting one.
The connected banana, I think.
The connected banana, yeah.
So one of the other questions I'd have to ask you, I mean, I can't have someone like AT&T for you from AT&T on the podcast without talking about 5G.
5G.
Everyone asks me about 5G all the time. Every day someone asks me about 5G.
Let's talk about 5G.
Let's talk about 5G.
Let's talk about it. So first of all, I will say that it's always around the combination of technologies together, and 5G is going to be the accelerator. So it's leveraging the low latency, the increased connection density, and the high bandwidth power of 5G that will allow the business to deploy that integrated solution and accelerate their digital transformation. Right? That's what we're saying.
Okay.
That's the point. And for example, 5G will enable self-driving cars and even smarter cities. But for a self-driving car to eventually take place, it needs to interoperate with environment and surrounding, like other vehicle, infrastructure, pedestrians, and other objects, right? So that's a big key. But wait, there's more. In order for a self-driving car to really work, in addition to that interoperability, it also have to talk to everything. That's where concept like V2X comes to play, right? So where we need the vehicle to talk to anything outside that are not necessarily connected, like manually driving cars that are not autonomous or they're not connected.
Right.
That will have to come up through the years. And 5G is kind of that enabler of all of that. Yeah,
I think one of the things one of the terms we use internally is, latency is currency. I don't know if you've heard that phrase, but it's sort of like the ability to shrink the edge and cloud, to shrink that gap. I mean, if you think about it, years ago, back in the good old days, there's a huge gap between the edge and the cloud, right? It was through some dial-up connection or something like that. It was quite a bit of a journey to get from the edge to the cloud. With 5G and with, single millisecond latencies, with edge infrastructure, for example, you're taking that latency down to, not quite zero, but as close as you can get. And so then, when you were talking about an interesting example, we have real-time autonomous systems. One of the key attributes of a successful autonomous system is the ability to manage those latencies, right? So that things can happen in near real time or real time by manipulating the real world. So I think for me, 5G, like you said, is a kind of a big enabling technology for those low latency scenarios. And of course, there's high bandwidth and other things. It's high density and all sorts of great things. But yeah,
absolutely. And our approach is, to your point that you were talking about, you introduced the concept of edge compute. So the way AT&T approach 5G is kind of looking at it from three pillars. The first pillar is the mobile 5G. You see us in 100 markets, and it's available now in, for 80 million people.
Yep.
The second pillar is that fixed wireline that helps us kind of lay the ground for businesses to upgrade and take advantage of 5G.
Right.
And then the third pillar that you just talked about is the edge compute. It allows that businesses to route application and that specific traffic to where they need it to be for more cost effective, so that they would get that low latency and they will get it at a much lower cost than what they got it in. Think about the amount of data that needs to be sent to the cloud from every video or camera sensor. You don't necessarily have to do that anymore with edge computing. Right. And I think the other point is that combining those elements, those three pillars, is really what can transform the industries that we talked about. But the exponential growth that comes with it, it's where you're combining the technologies like artificial intelligence, 5G, edge computing, and Internet of Things. That's the recipe that you get for successful innovation. That combination is what I've talked about earlier in that case of manufacturing, of what would enable that next level of transformation.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're going to be pretty busy then for the next decade or so.
You know what? And that is what kind of like my passion around IoT has been. In the Federal Reserve Bank, it's interesting to write papers, but you don't see the impact of it. Not in my lifetime, at least I haven't seen any impact of the articles that I helped write and edit. But in case of the IoT and my role right now, I'm in that eye of the storm, right? In that center of that transformation, and seeing it evolving and taking active part of it. It's where I'm still passionate. And as long as I have the job where I'm passionate about, I'll keep doing it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they say that like successful jobs, and I totally hear you on that, is like where you have, there's autonomy, there's passion, there's also the ability to have impact. And so, being in a role where you can see how the work that you're doing is kind of impacting your customers and impacting businesses, impacting people. And that's great. That's kind of very exciting. And, I think anyone that can get into a role that has impact, doesn't have to be a tech role, but anything like that, where they can see that their efforts are, they are being turned into something productive for society and for people. I think that's pretty exciting. So,
and especially awesome. in days where we are today, right? And with the reality that we are today, enabling doctors from all around the world, even with 5G, think about it, they could remotely partner to create surgery or to perform surgery in different part of the world. Having a doctor see a patient and diagnose a patient through video and connectivity the other side of the screen without exposing each other. That's the impact that I'm talking about, and you're seeing this changing every day and unfolds
fantastic
in front of our eyes.
Yes, I know. We are all in this together, as they say. So
that's why
good.
I need your
any other kind of closing. Oh, sorry.
No, I was saying that's what I need your cameras to come quick.
Oh yes. Yes. Okay. So any other closing thoughts or things that we should know about AT&T and IoT we haven't already talked about, or?
I'll say things that we need to know about AT&T and IoT. I'll say this is an exciting time for us to be part of this transformation. We'll looking forward to help more industries come together and learn more about IoT and Internet of Things. I still fly across the country, and either for customer meetings or for conventions and events. And I still get people asking me, what is IoT?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say we have some roads for education and teaching our generation about what is Internet of Things and how can they do the benefit for you and what they can help you with your industry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then we have a lot to work together, Microsoft and AT&T, and bring those solutions to market faster and more to more enterprise customers.
For sure. Yeah, I always tell people no shortage of work to do. So we just have to work together and figure it out. So that's good.
Okay.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, Lilac, for your time today. I appreciate jumping onto Teams here with me. This is a Teams-based podcast, #Teams. Not officially in a sponsor, but I feel like they should be paying us something here. But But anyway, no, I really appreciate you coming on the show and educating us about what's going on there. And I'm sure we will meet again face-to-face at some point in the future.
So thank you for having me over. I enjoyed the discussion, and really, I hope that the next time we meet, we'll be able to shake hands.
Yes, that would be good. Looking forward to it. Okay, super. All right. Thanks a lot, Lilac. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Pete, for having me over.
This is Pete Bernard. You've been listening to the IoT Unicorn. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for the next pod.